I was knee-deep in the pond muck, tugging out a stubborn cattail root when I heard the unmistakable screech of her voice, sharp, nasal, and somehow louder than the geese honking behind me. Walter Nolan. I turned slowly, wiping my hands on my jeans. There she was, standing right at the edge of my property like she owned the whole block. Brenda Zimmerman, HOA president, menace to peace, and self-appointed queen of our cul-de-sac. She had her signature wedge sandals on, standing with her arms crossed over a blindingly bright cardigan. And behind her, 3 of her book club cronies, all dressed like they were headed to a brunch in Beverly Hills instead of trespassing on a muddy backyard in rural Oregon. "How many times do we have to tell you?" Brenda barked. "Those creatures are a menace. They're aggressive. They hiss." "My husband got chased last week." "Don't walk on my property then," I said, straightening up. "I have every right to inspect community compliance," she snapped. "You signed the bylaws when you moved in." I pointed to the wooden fence they had just stepped over. "That fence. It means stay out, and unless geese are now covered in the HOA charter, you've got no business here." Brenda clicked her tongue and waved her hand like I was a toddler who didn't understand big words. "We've had multiple complaints. They're loud. They smell. They're not appropriate for a family neighborhood. They're not in your yard," I shot back. "My grandkids live 3 houses down. Then maybe teach them not to throw rocks at my animals." That shut her up for half a second, just long enough for me to start walking back toward the coop. I could hear Brenda whisper, shouting behind me to her friends Judith, Carol, and Donna, probably plotting some new HOA regulation designed specifically to screw me over. See, I'm not some crank. I'm a retired wildlife officer. I bought this property with the pond because I wanted space, quiet, and yes, my geese. I'd rescued 6 of them from a meat farm, and they were smarter than most folks I knew. They kept the yard free of pests, fertilized the grass, and let me know when someone was lurking around, like now. Because the moment I turned my back, I heard the telltale clang of my gate latch opening. I spun around. Brenda and her posse had walked straight into my fenced-in backyard like they were on a guided tour. "Back off," I yelled. "You're trespassing." "We're documenting your violations," she hollered, pulling out her phone. "You can't threaten us. You're standing in my yard. It's for the community's safety." That was the last straw. I reached down and unclipped the latch on the goose pen. The gate creaked open. 6 honking, hissing, wing-flapping beasts came charging out like feathery missiles with feet. Brenda didn't even get a warning honk before Cornbread, my biggest gander, lunged at her wedge sandal with a vengeance. All 4 women screamed. Judith tripped over her own handbag. Carol ran directly into the pond. Donna tried to climb the fence but got stuck halfway, and Brenda. She shrieked like a siren, waving her phone wildly as Cornbread nipped at her ankles. I leaned on the fence post, watching the chaos unfold. "You wanted documentation," I called. Smile for the wildlife cam, because yes, I had cameras. Multiple. Every angle of that yard was covered, and I was already sending clips to my lawyer. By the time they managed to scramble out of the yard mud-covered, honk traumatized, and shrieking about lawsuits, my geese had settled down into a smug little huddle by the pond. Cornbread dipped his beak in the water like he hadn't just committed feathery war. That night, I got a notice from the HOA official complaint citing aggressive livestock, hostile behavior toward the board, and intent to cause emotional distress. I laughed so hard I nearly choked on my coffee, because they had no idea what was coming. I'd been dealing with this power-hungry HOA for 2 years, watched them bully folks into repainting their homes, fine an elderly widow for having a flower box, and force a family to take down their holiday lights because they were too bright. But now they'd made it personal. They'd trespassed. On camera, in a fenced yard, I wasn't just going to respond, I was going to bury them. The next morning, I walked down to City Hall and filed a formal complaint for trespassing and harassment. Brought my flash drive, brought printed stills, even highlighted timestamps. The clerk at the desk raised her eyebrows when she saw Brenda's face mid-scream getting chased by Cornbread, HOA again, she asked. Yep, I said. Same crew, she gave a tired sigh. That's the third complaint this month. I wasn't surprised. By the time I got home, my inbox had exploded. Brenda had emailed the entire neighborhood, claiming I had unleashed wild animals on board members and was a danger to the community. So I emailed the footage to everyone. No commentary, no explanation. Just Brenda and her gang, hopping fences, walking into my yard and running like scared tourists on a bad safari. Within an hour, I had neighbors knocking on my door laughing, high-fiving, and asking if Cornbread gave autographs. And then came the twist. One neighbor, Dave from 2 doors down, pulled me aside and said, "You know, Brenda's been using HOA funds for all those inspections. She hired a private landscaper to review lawn compliance her son-in-law. We've been paying him through our dues." My eyebrows went up so high they nearly touched my hat. "You got proof?" Dave nodded. "Receipts. My wife's on the finance committee. She's had enough of Brenda's crap." I grinned. Looks like it's goose season. This wasn't just about birds anymore. It was about cleaning house. By the following Friday, Brenda's HOA circus had gone suspiciously quiet. No emails, no clipboard parades, not even a passive-aggressive flyer about lawn edging, which, frankly, was more suspicious than anything else. The last time Brenda went silent, she'd rewritten the trash bin policy to include no visible lids on Tuesdays. But I wasn't sitting idle. I'd already met with Officer Delaney at the Sheriff's Department. Small town or not, trespassing was still trespassing, and I had the footage to prove it. Delaney, a practical woman with a face like she'd seen one too many overexcited raccoons in garbage cans, took one look at the video and said, "You want to press charges?" I told her I hadn't decided yet, because what I really wanted was leverage. Later that day, I invited Dave and his wife, Lorna, over for coffee. They were both sharp, detail-oriented, and more importantly, tired of being pushed around. Lorna brought a manila envelope stuffed with documents printouts of HOA budgets, vendor payments, and a list of board-approved expenses that read more like a shopping list for Brenda's personal errands. She paid her son-in-law's lawn company almost $8,000 last year, Lorna said, flipping to a page with a spreadsheet. But here's the kicker: none of the properties listed match any real addresses in the neighborhood. I raised an eyebrow. "Fake invoices?" "Looks that way," she said. "The names are real, but the addresses, they're just numbers, no street names. Some of them go as high as 327, and we only have 84 houses." Dave added, "We think she's been funneling dues and laundering them through this landscaping service." Now we were no longer talking about HOA harassment. This was fraud. And fraud got you attention from more than just angry neighbors. That weekend, I reached out to an old buddy from my wildlife officer days, Cal Morgan. He'd retired from the force early, but not before spending 15 years as a fraud investigator for the state. We hadn't spoken in a while, but I figured if anyone could sniff out a paper trail, it was him. Cal showed up in a faded denim jacket and a look that said he'd rather be fishing. But once I laid out the documents, his mood shifted like a bloodhound catching scent. "She's sloppy," he muttered, flipping through the fake invoices. "Using the same invoice numbers on different dates, that's a rookie mistake." I handed him a USB with the scanned files. "Think it's worth sending up the chain? I'll make some calls," he said. If this is what it looks like, she's in deep. By Monday, Brenda must have caught wind of something because she went on the offensive. A new letter arrived, this time marked urgent community notice. It accused me of animal endangerment, willful hostility, and perhaps most absurdly, intentional sabotage of HOA operations. My favorite part. She was calling a special emergency board meeting to vote on whether or not my property should be placed under temporary behavior review status. There was no such thing in the bylaws. I checked, twice, so I decided it was time for a little show and tell. The meeting took place that Thursday evening in the community clubhouse. which looked like someone had decorated a dentist's waiting room with inspirational posters from the early 90s. Brenda stood at the front next to her usual trio, all of them wearing matching faux pearl necklaces like they were presenting a new line of handbag tassels. The room was packed. Word had spread about the Geese incident, and it had apparently stirred something in people. Neighbors I hadn't seen in months were in attendance, many of them whispering behind cupped hands, giving me nods as I walked in. Brenda banged the little wooden gavel she insisted on using and cleared her throat. "This meeting is to address a serious breach of community standards," she began. "A recent act of aggression and non-compliance has endangered board members and violated the spirit of our shared living agreement." I raised my hand. She ignored it. I raised it higher. She sighed. "Mr. Nolan, you will have a chance to speak." I stepped forward anyway, holding up a flash drive. "I've brought some visual aids." There were murmurs. Someone clapped. Brenda flushed. "This is not a trial," she snapped. Cal, who had quietly taken a seat in the back, stood. "Actually, it might be." Brenda's eyes darted toward him. "Who are you?" Cal Morgan, former state investigator. "I've reviewed your expenditure reports." That shut the room up. You could have heard a pin drop on shag carpet. "I've submitted a report to the County Fraud Division," Cal continued, "and I've shared the documents with the Oregon Department of Justice. You've got at least 3 counts of misappropriation of funds and over a dozen falsified invoices. That's felony-level territory." Brenda looked like someone had unplugged her. Donna opened her mouth, but Lorna beat her to it. "We've also called for a vote of no confidence." "We have signatures from over 60% of homeowners." Judith stood up. "This is a coordinated attack. They're lying." Dave held up a printed spreadsheet. "Then explain why this landscaping company is being paid for maintenance on addresses that don't exist." Someone near the back shouted, "Yeah, my yard hasn't been touched all year." Another voice added, "She charged me for a fence inspection that never happened." Brenda looked around, realizing her grip on the room was slipping fast. "You people have no idea how hard I've worked. You worked hard to get your son-in-law a paycheck." I cut in. "You worked hard to trespass on my property, then tried to weaponize the HOA to cover your tracks." "I was doing my duty as president." "Then why did you delete the video footage from the clubhouse security system the night after the incident?" Cal asked, pulling another sheet from his jacket. "We pulled the logs. You accessed the admin panel at 2:17 a.m. and wiped the drive." Brenda visibly swayed. I was securing sensitive data," she stammered. "Unlawfully," Cal said. "And poorly. You left a backup archive connected to the cloud." "We have everything." The meeting devolved into chaos. Some folks started shouting, others demanded resignations. A few people started filming on their phones. Brenda tried to call for a recess, but no one listened. By the end of the night, she was voted out. The sheriff's department served a subpoena 2 days later. I saw the cruiser pull up to her house, watched from my porch as she opened the door in a bathrobe, trying to argue with the deputy. It didn't go well. The HOA board dissolved a week later, pending a full audit. In the meantime, a temporary neighborhood council was formed. Dave and Lorna were nominated to lead it. I declined any official role, but I offered to host monthly potlucks in my yard. People liked that idea. Especially after I promised to keep cornbread and the rest of the flock behind the fence unless provoked. Things settled after that. The geese went back to sunbathing and honking at squirrels. My pond got a little quieter. The neighborhood started to breathe again, and as for Brenda, last I heard, she was trying to claim the whole thing was a political hit job. But with 3 criminal investigations open and a mountain of evidence, she didn't have many believers left. Justice didn't always come fast, but sometimes it came with honking wings and muddy beaks. It was almost surreal how quickly peace settled over the neighborhood after Brenda's empire collapsed. The HOA signs were quietly taken down from the clubhouse bulletin board. The weekly compliance inspections vanished overnight. The new interim council wasn't interested in fines or enforcement. They were focused on rebuilding trust. particularly after the audit results leaked. Turns out Brenda's theft went deeper than anyone expected. Lorna had found another stack of transactions buried under generic maintenance entries, this time for a cleaning company registered under a maiden name linked to Brenda's sister. The twist: that company didn't exist outside a shell website and a disconnected phone number. Between that and the fake landscaping bills, the total embezzled funds crossed the $30,000 mark, enough to trigger felony charges under state law. Cal kept me posted while the state prosecutor's office built the case. Given the sheer volume of evidence collected, they were coordinating a formal multi-charge indictment. Tampering with security systems, fraudulent billing, misuse of homeowner dues, it was shaping up to be a case that would make the evening news, at least locally. But while the legal machine churned in the background, something else was brewing. It started with a contractor's van parked half a block down. Harmless enough, except it had no company name or license info on the side. Then, a different unmarked vehicle showed up across the street from my house. It stayed parked for hours, engine off, windows tinted. On the third day, I walked over with cornbread waddling beside me and tapped on the driver's side glass. The man inside didn't roll it down. He just pulled away. I wasn't the only one noticing. Lorna called 2 nights later saying someone had been going through her recycling bin. Dave found a pair of footprints leading from his backyard gate to his shed boots, deep tread and too large to be his. The new council wasn't spying on people. They didn't have access to HOA funds, and there was no active enforcement policy anymore. So where was this coming from? Then, one evening near dusk, I caught someone trying to open the latch to my back gate. I was in the kitchen and saw the figure on my motion camera. I stepped onto the porch and flipped the floodlights on. The man paused, turned, and walked away like he'd gotten lost on the way to a barbecue. I sent the footage to Cal. He called me back the next morning. "That guy's not a neighbor," he said. "He's a licensed process server." I recognized him from a different case. Brenda's lawyer is trying to dig up leverage on anyone who voted her out. "For what?" I asked. "They're grasping," he said. "Counterclaims, intimidation, maybe trying to poison public opinion before the indictment hits. But if they're sending people to your house, it's time to make it official." So I filed a restraining order. The judge didn't hesitate. Between the trespass footage, the gate incident, and the pattern of surveillance, I had enough to get a temporary protective order. It barred Brenda or anyone representing her from coming within 200 feet of my property. I had it served through the sheriff's office. They delivered it the same day. I thought that might be the end of it. It wasn't. 3 nights later, I woke up to the sound of cornbread honking like someone had dropped a lawn mower in the pond. I threw on a jacket and stepped outside just in time to see 2 figures running from my yard. One ducked behind the neighbor's trash cans. The other hurdled the fence and disappeared into the dark. My security lights had caught everything. They'd broken the latch this time. The footage showed one of them trying to reach for the goose pen, flashlight in hand. The other had been holding what looked like a sack, possibly bait, possibly worse. My stomach turned. I called the sheriff. This time they sent a deputy within the hour. Officer Trevino was younger than Delaney, but had the same no-nonsense attitude. He watched the footage twice, then took down my statement along with the timestamps and export file. "You think they were trying to hurt the birds?" he asked. "Or steal them?" I said. "They're rescue animals, not worth anything in money but maybe to someone with a grudge." He nodded slowly. "We'll classify this as attempted theft and criminal trespassing. If we can ID them, we'll move to press charges." When he left, I stayed up the rest of the night watching the live feed on my monitors, thermos of coffee by my side. The geese eventually calmed down, but I didn't. The next day, Cal called again. "You're not going to like this," he said. "We traced one of the vehicles from the gate footage, registered to a shell company, same address used for Brenda's fake cleaning business." "Let me guess," I said. "Another family member, her nephew, lives 2 towns over. He's got a record petty theft, 1 assault charge from a bar fight last year." My blood ran cold. They're escalating, I said. Yeah. And I think it's time we go public. Cal had a contact at the local news station, a weekend anchor named Melissa Tran, known for digging into small-town political scandals. We met her the next afternoon at Lorna and Dave's place. She brought a camera crew, a microphone, and a stack of questions. We gave her everything: the fake invoices, the HOA bank statements, the footage of the trespassers, the restraining order, even the full video of Brenda and her goon squad getting chased by Cornbread. Melissa didn't even try to hide her reaction. "This is going to explode," she said. "You're okay with going on record?" I nodded. "They came after me, after my animals. They crossed the line." The segment aired 2 nights later. It opened with a slow zoom on the faded HOA sign still hanging crooked on the clubhouse wall. Melissa narrated over clips of the financial documents, the trespassing footage, and a blurred-out version of the gate incident. Then came the interviews, Lorna explaining how the finances were manipulated, Dave describing the intimidation tactics, and finally, me standing beside the pond, Cornbread waddling beside me like a bodyguard. By the time the story ended, viewers knew everything. The fraud, the surveillance, the attempted break-in. Brenda's name was front and center, along with the pending indictment and the protective order. The fallout was immediate. Phones rang off the hook at the sheriff's office. More neighbors came forward with their own stories: mysterious fines, threats of foreclosure, unexplained violations that never led to paperwork. The DA's office requested the entire HOA's financial history, going back 5 years. They weren't just looking at Brenda anymore. They were investigating anyone who'd signed off on those transactions. Judith and Donna both lawyered up within 48 hours. And me? I installed a second set of cameras, upgraded the latch on the gate with a reinforced lock, put in a motion alert system that pinged my phone every time someone stepped near the fence. The geese were on high alert too, especially Cornbread, who started honking at shadows after dusk. But I wasn't afraid, because this wasn't just about me anymore. Brenda had turned a neighborhood into a playground for her ego. She'd stolen money from retirees, harassed families, and used every ounce of fake authority she had to control people. And when that crumbled, she tried to silence anyone who stood in her way, but she'd underestimated us. We weren't just neighbors, we were witnesses, and we weren't backing down. The morning after the news segment aired, the neighborhood was unrecognizable, but in the best way possible. People were walking their dogs again. Kids were riding bikes in driveways that Brenda's old patrols used to monitor like a hawk. The air felt lighter, like the whole block had exhaled after holding its breath for too long. But beneath the calm, the real storm was gathering. 2 detectives from the county's Financial Crimes Division showed up at my place just before noon. Not in uniforms, button-down shirts, badges on belts, and folders tucked under their arms. They introduced themselves as Detectives Ashby and Patel, and they weren't there to ask questions. They were there to confirm them. "We've got 2 warrants in motion," Ashby said as I poured coffee into a pair of chipped mugs. "One for the HOA's financial records, the other for a storage unit Brenda leased under an alias." I raised an eyebrow. "She's got a stash." "Looks like it," Patel said. "We found the lease registered under a woman named Darlene Briggs, but the billing address matches her home. Same handwriting on the form as the HOA budget notes. We're guessing she kept records off-site, possibly even items purchased with community funds." "Like what?" I asked. Ashby pulled out a printed photo. It was grainy security cam footage from a storage facility, but clear enough to see her. Brenda, hunched slightly, carrying what looked like a box of electronics. The time stamp was from 2 weeks before the audit started. "She's been moving things out slowly," Ashby said. "This wasn't just embezzlement. We're now looking at potential evidence destruction. That bumps the charges." I handed them a flash drive. "That's the latest footage from my yard. From the night someone tried to open the Goose pen." Patel took it without a word and nodded. "Appreciated." They left soon after, and I stood on my porch watching their unmarked Crown Vic drive off down the hill. My geese waddled by the pond, preening in the sun like they had no idea their honking had launched a criminal investigation. Cornbread fluffed his wings and gave me a lazy side eye. "Don't get cocky," I said. "We're not done yet." Later that afternoon, Lorna called. Her voice was sharper than usual, no trace of her usual calm. She's trying to dissolve the HOA, not legally, just sent out an email saying it's disbanded and she's no longer liable for anything. Can she even do that? I asked. No. But she's already shut down the website and wiped the digital records. We only have what we printed and what's on backup flash drives. What's she hoping for? Probably to cause enough confusion that no one knows what rules still apply. I hung up and called Cal. He didn't answer right away, but when he did, his voice was tight. "They raided the storage unit," he said. "Found 8 boxes of HOA documents, 2 laptops, and a safe with 27 cashier's checks made out to a landscaping company that only existed on paper. All dated within the last 18 months. That enough? It's more than enough. They're indicting her. Full felony charges: wire fraud, financial misconduct, evidence tampering, and criminal conspiracy. Probably looking at a grand jury by next week. And the others? Judith's name is on half those checks. Donna signed off on the budget approvals. Both are being brought in for questioning. They're already trying to pin it all on Brenda, but the paper trail's too tight." I didn't say anything for a moment. The sun was dipping just behind the pine trees, casting long shadows across the yard. Cornbread honked once, like he could sense the shift. "Thanks, Cal. You did more than most," he said. "You didn't just fight back, you made it stick." That night, the neighborhood threw an impromptu gathering on the Greenbelt. No agenda, no fines, just people showing up with folding chairs, paper plates, and casseroles. Somebody brought a Bluetooth speaker. Kids played tag. Someone brought a homemade cornbread for mayor sign that got more laughs than any HOA memo ever had. I stood at the edge of it all, hands in my jacket pockets, watching as folks I hadn't seen smile in 2 years finally let loose. Cal was there too, standing beside Lorna and Dave, sipping a soda and chatting with the new interim committee members. Melissa Tran showed up briefly, just to check in. She didn't bring a camera this time, just a pie and a grin. "Never thought I'd see this neighborhood relaxed," she said as she handed me a slice. "You did something good here." "I just opened a gate," I said. "The rest happened on its own," she laughed. "Well, that gate shook a pretty big tree." As the crowd thinned out, someone started a small bonfire in one of the portable pits. Folks pulled their chairs closer. Stories started flowing about Brenda, about the old days, about the ridiculousness of living under the rule of someone who thought holiday wreaths were a community threat. Eventually, I walked home under a sky full of stars, Cornbread trotting beside me like a feathered sentinel. The night was quiet. No unmarked cars, no flashlights near the gate, just the soft rustle of wind through the trees and the gentle splash of water from the pond. The following week, the charges were made public. Brenda was arrested on 5 felony counts, including grand theft and evidence tampering. Her mugshot made the local paper. Judith and Donna were both named as co-conspirators, now facing their own indictments after investigators uncovered emails confirming they'd known about the false invoices for over a year. The county announced they'd be appointing a financial mediator to oversee the dissolution of the HOA. The remaining funds, what little hadn't been siphoned off, would be returned to the homeowners as partial reimbursement. An external auditor was brought in to ensure transparency. Cal was approached about joining a permanent neighborhood advisory board. He declined but recommended Lorna and Dave, who were nominated by a unanimous vote. As for me, I stayed on the sidelines by choice. I wasn't interested in meetings or votes, but I did put up a new sign on the edge of my fence. It read "Private property, no trespassing." Geese patrolled, and underneath in smaller print, "Violators will be documented, prosecuted, and publicly embarrassed." The sign became a bit of a landmark. People took photos with it. Someone even printed it on mugs as a fundraiser for the new community green space project. Life moved on. The fence latch held strong. The cameras stayed online. The geese grew a little fatter from all the carrots and corn kernels donated by neighbor kids. And Brenda? Last I heard, her trial was scheduled for the fall. Her lawyer had filed a motion to suppress some of the evidence. It was denied. Justice had a long reach, and this time it had feathers. The neighborhood never went back to how it was, but that was the point. The fear was gone. The secrecy. The power plays. All of it replaced by something better: accountability, humor, and a shared story that people actually wanted to tell. And it all started with a gate, a trespassing queen, and a flock of very angry geese.